roll call for Senate Revenue. Senator Case? Present. Senator French?
Right there. Present.
Senator Ide?
Here.
Senator Pappas?
Here.
Chairman McEwen?
Present.
All present, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we're gonna start out with Senate File 194. Senator Crum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Senate File 194 has to do with license of e-cigarettes and vaping material. I'll go through the bill here fairly quickly, but let me tell you what the problem is overall so you understand and get into the bill. The problem is we have illegal or unlicensed material coming in and being put into vaping pipes and e-cigarettes. And what that's doing is causing people to get ill, end up in our hospitals, and even die because this illegal material coming from foreign countries. Don't want to necessarily mention the foreign countries, but from people that aren't friends to the United States coming in, and it's hurting our young people, it's hurting older people. It's like I say, it's putting them in our hospitals, and people are dying because these things aren't licensed and regulated. And so that's what this bill is. What it will do is, like I say, is put a license on it. It'll make sure that trademarks and patents are protected by those who are licensed as things are bought and sold, and protect those folks. It'll allow the department to reach out if there's a problem. They'll know who to contact if there's a problem with a product. Right now, there's no way to really trace these products. Now there'll be a way to trace the products. If for some reason something happens, there'll be standards and certifications that'll be met to allow the product again to be in theory safe. And that's really the bill in general. You know, I know there's some people in here that are more expert than I am at it. You know, we can walk through the bill line by line, but I know in the essence of time, that's the bill. It's about licensing unregulated, dangerous e-cigarette and vaping products that come in and they're hurting our people, putting people in hospitals, and frankly, killing a few people. And that's the bill.
I just have one quick question.
Yes, sir.
You started out and you said the stuff that's coming in is already illegal?
Yes, it's coming into the country illegally, yes.
Okay, thank you.
There are, Mr. Chairman, there are legal products, you know, that are licensed and but there's a whole group of unlicensed products that are illegal coming in. And what this bill will do is make sure that anything that's being sold in the state of Wyoming is a licensed product.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the people that are selling the legal vaping and whatever that stuff is, they're also marketing the stuff you're talking about?
Some may, and then others are not. I mean, there's some are just setting up shop because there's no licensing procedure. You know, some people just set up a shop that buys illegal material and sells it.
Oh, really?
You know, like I mean, it's contraband basically, right? But it's not contraband because it's not in the state of Wyoming, it's not illegal. It's not, you know, so this makes it licensed where all the product has to be licensed and certified. And then it'll allow the police, if they go in and inspect a shop, they'll be able to see, yep, this is a good product, or no, this doesn't have the state of Wyoming seal on it, and therefore it's illegal product.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Crum. So this casts a pretty wide net, so the legitimate operators would be swept into that net with more regulations and have to be licensed. Just trying to understand this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, it really doesn't change the way the legitimate operators are operating because they're already buying you know, products that are certified. The state of Wyoming will have a license on it, but it doesn't cause them to have an additional license, but it doesn't change the way they operate because they already got the right product in their stores.
Follow up.
Just a quick follow-up. So the ones that are operating legitimately, they're already required to be licensed? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
They are for some of their products, some of their not, and this will make all products have to be licensed.
And this adds a $1,000 licensing fee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Uh.
Any other questions? Think you
Thank
gotta
you,
get
Mr.
somewhere
Chairman.
else. Any other testimony?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I'm here today representing Altria Client Services. With me is David Sylvia. I'll let him introduce himself in just a minute. I want to just set the stage for this bill, if you will. Senators, you might recall last year we had a registry type bill for e-cigarettes and e-vapor. It did come through the Senate and it died a most unfortunate and death over in the House because of a couple of amendments put on in third reading. It would have addressed to some degree this same issue. What we did looking forward to the 25 session was bring a bill that is strictly focused on the manufacturer and the manufacturer licensing. I'll let Mr. Sylvia go into that in just a minute. But again, what Senator Crum indicated, that this is really a protection of our youth and of our public from these illicit vape products. And you might be wondering why I'm here representing Altria and promoting such a bill. One of the things in the history over the last 20, 25 years of tobacco control in the state of Wyoming, it is primarily relied outside of the tax policy, but primarily the public policy arena has relied on our company to bring forth youth access and prevention measures. And we've done that consistently over the years, starting back in 2005 when we banned internet sales of tobacco products. We presented in 2007 some restrictions on self-service. I know, Mr. Chairman, you have a facility and you probably remember those days when product was on the counter, and we now moved it behind the counter to protect it from youth access. A variety of other youth access and cessation prevention programs that we have done. And most recently, it was in 2020 with Senate File 50, where we promoted and supported the raising of the legal age to purchase these products to 21. Again, all based on consumer protection. So that's why we're here today supporting this bill. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Sylvia. Thank you.
Thank you for testifying. Mr. Sylvia.
Thank you, Chairman McEwen and members of the committee. My name is David Sylvia. I work at Altria Client Services, and I'm a Senior Director of Public Policy at the company. Here to express our strong support for Senate File 194, which aims to curb the flow of illicit e-vapor products into Wyoming. As it stands today, China is flooding the United States with illegal vapor products that lack any form of regulatory oversight. These illicit products are reaching shelves in the U.S. and here in Wyoming through not through legal channels, but outside of the law. They're made in factories that no one inspects. They contain ingredients that are not disclosed, and they're smuggled by the millions into the U.S. in flagrant violation of U.S. custom laws. These illicit products pose significant public health and safety risks because we don't know what's in them. It undermines the legitimate manufacturers and retailers doing business in the state, and it funds foreign activities that compromise national security. This bill offers a common sense solution. It requires the manufacturers of vapor products, including us, to demonstrate that we're not engaged in illicit manufacture, importation, or distribution of our products. and it includes other safeguards to ensure that licensed distributors and retailers are not inadvertently carrying illicit products. So the unregulated nature of these products means that they reach consumers without any assurances regarding their safety. Recent studies have shown widespread mislabeling and adulteration of these products, including false claims about the level of nicotine that are in them. This lack of oversight results in potentially harmful ingredients being consumed by millions of users. Now, while the FDA is charged with enforcing against illicit products, there are gaps in their ability to monitor the products after they get in through U.S. Customs. Once on American soil, states have limited ability to remove the products, even though they're breaking federal law. Now, one of the more troubling aspects of the illicit vapor market is the impact it has on underage users. Now, while we're of course very happy to see the level of youth usage of vapor products has gone down over 60% in the last 5 years, many of these products, some designed with built-in video games, are blatantly targeted at minors. The proposed bill includes provisions to curb underage use by giving states tools to enforce against the illicit manufacturers making these products. So if I may, I'll go through a couple elements of the bill and to how they're designed to establish a reasonable regulatory framework. So first off, as I mentioned, all vapor manufacturers must obtain a license to operate within Wyoming. Second, to get this license, manufacturers must provide some very basic information that all legal manufacturers should be able to easily supply. First, business contact information, so we know who's manufacturing these products. Second, a copy of the company's PACT Act registration or an explanation as to why the PACT Act does not apply. And third, an attestation to full compliance with Customs and Border Protection requirements with supporting documentation. Now, this is important because a lot of the illicit manufacturers, when they ship their products in, mislabel what they actually are in order to try to get them through Customs and Border Patrol. Now, filing false certification is considered a violation of the Consumer Protection Act, granting enforcement authority to the Attorney General and relevant federal and state agencies. To enforce against the illicit actors that are often impossible to find, foreign entities must list an agent of service of process and post a $25,000 surety bond. And then starting July 1, should this bill pass, the Department of Revenue will publicly list all licensed vapor manufacturers on its website, fostering transparency and compliance for retailers to know if the products they're buying are allowed in the state. Now, the the current draft of the bill mandates biannual inspections of manufacturers, but I know that there's going to be an amendment that would change that to once a year. And the bill also requires that vapor products be distributed only through licensed entities. This makes it less likely for illicit products to slip into the supply chain. And then lastly, the legislation prohibits direct consumer delivery sales of vapor products, ensuring that all sales occur through licensed channels. So in conclusion, Senate Bill 195 will represent a common sense approach to protect public health and safety, support responsible businesses, and curb illicit vapor products here in Wyoming. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions and urge you to support passage of Senate File 194. Thank you.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your testimony. That was enlightening. A little bit, I don't know much about it. First question is Altria, hard to pronounce, Altria?
Altria, yes, sir.
Altria, is that good? Is vaping products a big part of your business? And the second question would be, how prevalent are these manufacturers? Are they within our borders of our country? Are they outside? Is there any manufacturers in Wyoming? Just a couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ida, thank you for the question. In the marketplace today, based upon best estimates that we have, it appears as though between 60 and 70% of vapor product sales are illicit products. It has, in the last 4 to 5 years, really taken over the marketplace. A lot of that stems from the FDA's slow review of applications. So every manufacturer who legally wants to sell a vapor product in the United States has to get authorization from the FDA. They've been unfortunately very slow at that, and it opened up a, shall we say, a vacuum that's being filled by these illicit manufacturers who are not submitting applications. So that's what the marketplace looks like today. The large majority of them come out of China. The largest tobacco company in the world is the Chinese tobacco monopoly. These companies are licensed by them to manufacture the products. They're not allowed to sell them in China, but they allow them to be, sold outside of China. Altria, Altria is the parent company or holding company of primarily Philip Morris USA. We own Marlboro, U.S. Smokeless Tobacco, Copenhagen and Skoal, and we do have another company that makes vapor products. We have a authorized product from the FDA called Enjoy. And then we also have a nicotine pouch company also.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions, I suppose. I sort of do remember the bill from last year. I think you were here to testify
Yes, I
with us
was,
on
Senator.
that, and Mr. Pickard was here. And as I recall a little bit about that, we're talking about illicit sales from another country, probably China, I suppose. But these don't come in on like submarines and people sneak them onto the beach at night and they unload all these cartons like the old movies. That's not the way that's happening.
No.
These come in on ships, they're shipped, they're unloaded, they're distributed. And so when you say illicit, it's not illegal. How come we don't have guards at where we unload the ships and we shoot those guys and, it's like prohibition. How come we're not doing that?
Mr. Chairman.
And I got follow-up.
You want me to, Senator Case, do you want me to?
Yeah,
answer
why
that?
aren't we shooting them?
Yeah, so.
Well, prohibition was about revenue too.
There is a federal task force that was stood up about 8 months ago that includes Customs and Border Patrol, the Department of Justice, and the FDA, among others, that have been working to try to stem the flow of these products. But as you may be aware, when products come into ports in the United States, 100% of the products are not inspected, right? On average, best estimates that have been shared with me is around 10% of containers are actually inspected. They rely on manufacturers to follow the law on their customs declarations and list the products accurately. What is being found is instead of listing these as vapor products, they're listing them as toys, batteries, clothing, in order to get through customs with and reduce the likelihood that they're inspected. Once they get through customs, they then work with distributors who are comfortable operating in this manner, these wholesalers, and then the wholesalers will sell them to retailers who choose to sell them. So the problem, while it originates when they come through customs, once they are in the United States, laws like this help the states to put up some additional safeguards.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up a little bit. So if we can't catch them when they come in through unloading the containers, but distributors sell these products to maybe wholesalers that sell them to stores. I don't know how the market works. But
Yeah,
eventually there's
three-tiered system primarily.
three-tier system. And Mr. Chairman, why can't we go to the stores and then find out where they came from and go up, find out where they came from and do something about that? Is it because that's illegal, right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, that is an approach. The hope here, though, is if we can start where the problem originates. Because what will occur is that if this bill were to pass, you have to attest that you're following all U.S. customs laws in the importation of the product.
Mhm.
Our hope would be that illicit manufacturers choose not to, in the state of Wyoming, take that chance. And instead of shipping their products in and selling them to distributors who would then sell them into the state of Wyoming, because of this barrier, they would choose not to do that. I can tell you that a couple other states where this type of regulation has been put in, we've seen a significant decline in the illicit products being sold because those illicit manufacturers have chosen not to, put themselves in jeopardy of breaking the state law.
So, Mr. Chairman, I remember last year, Mr. Chairman, that there was, a lot of this was about products that had not been, I guess there was a registration with the FDA. And I might be using the wrong term, but I think that's what it was. And the FDA had been working very diligently and only processed a very small number of applications. I think maybe your company's application was processed.
Yes, and it was
So,
authorized.
so they're processed by the FDA, but there was a whole bunch of other companies in the queue that hadn't been processed yet. And the bill that we had last year kind of said, if you haven't been processed yet, you're gonna, it's not an accepted product. Does this follow along the same lines?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, the goal is similar to get these illicit products out, but the mechanism is different. When we were talking about the directory legislation last year, the goal was to allow products that were following the FDA regulatory process, whether they had been authorized already or they had submitted their application and they were waiting to hear from the agency. Those products would have been allowed to come in. What we're seeing is that these illicit manufacturers are not even bothering to submit an application because they are finding ways around, they're finding ways to sell their products without having to go through that. If they, if this bill was to pass, any manufacturer who said that, yes, we are following the customs laws, which in some regards are maybe a little bit lower barrier than having an authorized, definitely a lower barrier than having an authorized product. We believe it will stem the tide of a lot of these real illicit manufacturers because they're not going to want to be subject to the fines and, having their products taken off shelves. And also, think about it. If there's a list of legitimate manufacturers that can be sold here, when retailers are looking to buy certain products, because most retailers want to comply with the laws, they'll buy from the manufacturers that are legitimate and are following the rules. So it gives them some transparency as to which products they can purchase.
Okay, thanks.
I have a quick question. Are there established rules that they're not following, or are we trying to establish rules for them to follow?
Mr. Chairman, when it comes to importing any product into the United States, Customs and Border Patrol has a very well-established set of rules, regulations, and forms that they have to fill out. These people are not doing that properly.
My question was more aimed at the product itself. Is
Understood.
there a rule on the product, what it has to have, what it needs to meet for standards, and who made those rules? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there is a set of, loosely call them standards, but the way the Food and Drug Administration works, every company who legally wants to sell a product has to submit an application. In that application, you have to provide your ingredients disclosures. You have to do testing to show not only what's in the product, but when the consumer uses it, what are they getting into their system and what are they exhaling? There's rules and regulations around how these products can legally be labeled in marketing. And that is a set of rules and responsibilities that the FDA puts in place, and we have to show that's what we're doing in order to get authorization. The difficulty here is these illicit Chinese manufacturers are not doing any of that. They're not even submitting an application. But because they're finding the distribution system to be pretty porous, their products are being able to get into the marketplace. So there are rules, but they're just deciding not to follow them.
Trust me, I love the FDA. I sell soup for a living.
Okay,
If I put a plastic container with grapes, watermelon, and honeydew out, I have to label it's grapes, watermelon, and honeydew. My question is, I don't see what we do in this legislation when we couldn't just gear up tobacco inspections. I'm not sure it's gonna slow it down. But that's just my thought on that.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, what this would allow is on those annual inspections at the retail, if a retailer was selling products that are not on, call it the certified manufacturer list for the state of Wyoming, those products would be illegal from being sold and can be taken out.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might add, current Wyoming law requires cigarette manufacturers to be licensed. And this mirrors the kind of that process. This is actually in Title 39, where the cigarette manufacturing is held in another location in the Green Books because it's enforced through the Attorney General's office under the Master Settlement Agreement. But this type of manufacturing licensing regime is well known within our Green Books, well known within the product categories, and certainly well known to the manufacturers that the products that are on your shelves are undertaking. So if that helps clarify that just a little bit.
It does, and maybe I misrepresented myself. I sell more than soup. In fact, I'm helping grow the child cancerhood problem in the world. Not on purpose, but I sell tobacco products and go through the inspections. And I will tell you, I don't think one package of cigarettes would get through the inspection without a state tobacco tax stamp on it.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm wasting time now, sorry. Thank you for your testimony. Does the department have anything on this?
So you get an annual inspection, huh? What you get, right?
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
They're big on that. Mr. Fanning,
Mr. Chairman,
welcome to Revenue.
thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Members of the committee, Brett Fanning, Excise Tax Administrator at the Department of Revenue. The department just has a couple things to note for this bill. So we can administer this bill as it's currently written. We do the cigarette inspections, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, and we do anticipate there being some crossover in our inspections and people who sell cigarettes, and then people who also sell cigarettes and vapor material. So we do anticipate there being a synergy here, where if we're going to go do a tobacco inspection, maybe at a supermarket or retail outlet, this would also be a product that we could also inspect for in those same duties. The second point I wanted to mention on this was that if you look on page 11 of the bill, the lines 12 and 13, That just relates to our inspection duties. And right now, we currently try and visit every retail outlet once every 2 years. And so if it were possible, I've heard there's maybe amendment in the works. This, making it to once a year as opposed to twice a year, I do not anticipate having to have additional personnel costs. Because then if it's once a year, I believe that our field inspections for cigarettes could also piggyback with this law. Twice a year, and then if there's a potential violation, we don't feel we have the capacity right now to do that. So, Mr. Chairman, if you just,
Can you hold their center right?
yes, sir.
Yeah, real quick, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, thanks for being here. I always like listening to your testimony. What, so right now, you don't inspect these if they're on the shelf in, alongside cigarettes. And so it would be efficient for you or for the department to inspect those at the same time and, you know, under a lesser time frame, kind of like you said, maybe once a year or once every 2 years, whatever. But I just need to understand you don't inspect those products right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Senator I, my pleasure. Yes, we do not inspect vapor products right now. Our inspections are only limited to cigarettes and making sure that stamp is applicable on the package.
If we told you to go inspect vapor material tomorrow, would you have a set of standards and way to inspect it, or would you have to develop that?
Mr. Chairman, we would have to develop it. Now, there is some language in the bill saying that there are some guidelines for us to follow that's included in that registration process. But right now, we don't open the packages. And so we just make sure there's the stamp. So it would be very similar to the vapor material. We're just looking to see if that manufacturer is on our list that we put on our website and we've got a licensee for, and just making sure those match.
So it'd basically be the tax stamp?
Mr. Chairman, in this case, it would be the manufacturer for the vapor material. It's the tax stamp for the cigarette. So we're looking just for the manufacturer based on how I read this bill.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fanning. Please stick around. And anybody else that wants to come up?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. We support this bill, and I'll go into the reasons why. Bear in mind that we represent the brick and mortar operations, packaged liquor stores that also sell tobacco products. In fact, I used to sell tobacco products as well back in the day. However, one thing I think is important, our primary product, of course, is alcohol. And alcohol is strictly regulated at the manufacturer level. For example, and I get tons of questions from retailers about what they can carry or what they should carry. If a retailer calls me and says, this funny looking guy just came in trying to push this stuff called Mosier's Moonshine, should I sell it? The first thing I'd ask is, are they federally licensed and are they licensed by the state? And if they said no, I'd say, you're out of your mind. If the guy goes blind or dies who drinks it, you are liable. And I don't think your insurance company would want to know you're selling unregulated product as well. And in that same sense, and some of you have seen this, there's been people running around the state pushing low THC hemp products. In fact, I just ran an article in the newsletter about it. And the concern, obviously, is they're not regulated by manufacturer, and so you have no idea where they're made, probably somebody's garage. And so the retailer themselves is liable if there's any problems with that product because you are selling it. For example, obviously, if this low THC product is not low THC, you're selling weed, which is its own set of problems. But also if there is some sort of contaminant or some sort of issue with it, the retailer themselves could be liable for that sale, because if harm comes to the customer, it's on us. And so my recommendation to retailers on that issue, for example, is don't carry the stuff because we have no regulation over manufacture and what the real product is you're selling. With vapor material, a lot of this stuff, you've probably seen it as juice. It's in all the import. Well, there's not a regulation on manufacture. And so you'll notice that most of the liquor stores you go to will sell vapor material, but it's not that kind of vapor material. Because my recommendation of a retailer calls is say, I tell them not to carry it. Because you have no idea what's really in that, who made it. Now, the hemp products I'm talking about, it probably is in somebody's garage. And if a bottle of turpentine spilled into it, I would hope that it's somebody that goes, I don't think I probably want that in there. However, if the turpentine spills in an overseas manufacturing plant that's a sweatshop, I don't think they much care about American youth. And so my concern, because as you know, and some of you have had liquor licenses or have one, our insurance is very prohibitive and very costly. With these hemp products, I've had retailers call their insurance companies and they said, the reply was, you can sell them, but you better find another insurance company. Because the door of liability on unregulated manufactured products is so high. So that's my concern. Do I mind vaping? Do I mind selling vape products? No. But my concern is the liability profile for retailers if that product is not safe. The good thing about this bill is the bulk of the majority, the huge majority, is not on the retailers itself. It's on the manufacturers. Just like cigarettes, you're not going to have to put those stamps on. You get that stuff from your wholesaler and the regulation takes place above our heads. And so I don't see any added burden to the retailer, but what I do see is a safer product for our retailers to sell, which many of them aren't selling because of those concerns on any liability issues. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time and I will take any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mosier.
Thank you.
Please hang tight. Do we have anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, we have a couple of people who registered to testify online. They don't have their hands up, but if they'd like to testify, they'd raise their hand, I could let them in. I'm admitting Corey Talich.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Corey Talich. I represent Town and Country Supermarket Liquors here in Cheyenne. We're a locally owned, family-run business that takes great pride in serving our customers and giving back to Wyoming communities in many charitable ways for the past 75 years. I am here this afternoon asking for your support for the passage of Senate File 194. While our primary business is liquor, wine, and beer, we do sell hundreds of tobacco products. We are determined to ensure that age-restricted products, including e-vapor products, are only sold to adults 21 and over. In fact, we do not allow underage people in our store unless they are with their parents. Keeping all illegal products, including e-vapor products, out of the hands of youth matters deeply to us. However, today the market is flooded with numerous illicit e-vapor products. Non-compliant and illegal flavored e-vapor products are contributing to underage e-vapor use. Town and Country Supermarket Liquors and other Wyoming retailers need help in regulating e-vapor products in our stores. Town and Country Supermarket Liquors and other responsible retailers deserve to be able to compete in a market where everyone is following the same rules. When I look at stores around Cheyenne, I see many e-vapor products that we do not carry. We choose not to carry them because they are not compliant. However, that puts us at a disadvantage. We don't want to lose our customers to other stores who choose to carry a wider selection of e-vapor products just because they choose to carry non-compliant products. Please help all retailers make sure that we are doing the right thing and we are not being penalized for making every effort to carry only compliant e-vapor products. By having a solid licensing and enforcement policy for the state responsible retailers and wholesalers will be able to operate on a level playing field. Isn't that what free enterprise is all about? Thank you for your time. Please support retailers like Town and Country Supermarket Liquors who are trying to follow the law and be good business stewards in our community.
Just one quick question. Do you sell Mosier's Moonshine?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it tasted like turpentine when he brought it to have me sample, so we do not.
Amen, brother. Any questions? Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm admitting Michael Bailey. Michael Bailey's has not accepted the invitation to come in, even though he has his hand up. He needs to click yes when I invite him to come
Do
in.
you think he can hear us, Mr. Chairman? Mike Bailey, hey, accept the invitation to come into the meeting. Jonathan, can you text him? Okay, Jonathan is the representative for the Petroleum Marketers Association. Mike Bailey has several retail gasoline and convenience stores there he is.
Welcome to Revenue. I think you're muted.
Now can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize for the technical difficulties. When I hit the button, it kicked me out. So I'm Mike Bailey. Again, I'm the owner of the Pit Stop Travel Centers based out of Riverton, Wyoming. We've got 9 stores around the state. I employ about 150 individuals in the state. And again, we sell tobacco products, and we have some stores that sell alcohol, and we sell vapor products with those. As a small business owner, it's very hard to be able to keep up with the, federal regulations and what's legal and what isn't and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's why I'd really ask you to support Senate File 194. We need to improve the enforcement of these vapor products. Again, we carry the ones that Altria and the other legitimate companies carry. And there's a ton of stuff out on the market that is, being sold by what I'll call less than reputable wholesalers. And we have no idea whether they're legal, whether they've paid their state tax, what those products contain. If they're not registered, we don't know if they really contain, X% nicotine or that's way higher and all that kind of stuff. So I think having a licensing system that applies to all of these parts of the trade within the state will help manufacturers, wholesalers, retails, and the whole supply chain operate with confidence that we know what we're allowing our customers to be able to purchase. Like the previous person testified, we go out of our way to make sure that we are watching the age restriction on tobacco and alcohol products and vaping products. And we just want to do things right. We want to sell products that are legal and have been proven and tested, and we're not going to harm our customer. And we want to follow the laws and only sell legal products. So again, I think establishing this enforcement system will help us do that. It'll help the state know that they're getting paid for the tax that they're due. Because again, like cigarettes, they talked about have a stamp. Well, these vapor products don't have a stamp. So there's no way for us to know. And the federal government has not done a good job in making it something that's available for us to look up and say that, X brand is or is not compliant. So it's very challenging. So I don't think this bill would hurt retailers in any way that are wanting to be legitimate. And so I would strongly suggest that you support Senate File 194. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me testify remotely today.
Questions? Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Mr. Fanning, could you come up for a minute, please? Just a quick question before we start working this bill. Do you all currently inspect vape shops?
Mr. Chairman, the answer is yes, if they sell cigarettes. If they do not sell cigarettes, we do not visit a vapor-only store. Our inspections right now are only for cigarettes.
So would you be capable of inspecting vape shops without any large increase in expense?
Mr. Chairman, this is something we've talked about. The answer is yes. We believe this is something we can do with a proposed amendment for a once a year inspection. We believe this is something that we can do. Right now, we inspect several hundred retail outlets across the state. And in my research for this bill, trying to figure out how many vapor only or establishments that we would not see, there are some out there that only sell vapor. Right now, we anticipate being able to cover that workload based on the language in this bill.
And one last quick question. The $1,000 license fee, who pays that and where does it go?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering when that was gonna come up. So the $1,000 annual license fee is gonna be paid by that manufacturer who gets that license for us. Then this bill creates a separate fund that goes into. The way we read the bill is that fund is gonna be used for the Department of Revenue for IT programming to do that licensing system. And then for any of these unanticipated travel costs or expenditures that could be associated with fulfilling the obligations of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Yes, sir.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, how is that $1,000 fee set? I mean, is that just arbitrary with this bill, or I'm sure it comes from somewhere? And is that high, low? What's your thoughts on that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, no knowledge on where that figure exactly came from. When we were discussing this bill, we're trying to figure out how many manufacturers are going to license with the Wyoming Department of Revenue with this. And so that was primarily the discussion I was focused on. Maybe bringers of the bill or industry may have a better idea in looking at other states on to answer your question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Thank you, sir.
Hang on. Senator Case.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is kind of interesting. So, who pays the bond of $25,000? And do they also pay the license fee of $1,000?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, yes, in reading this, it's the manufacturer who pays the $1,000 annual licensing fee, and then it is also that manufacturer who pays that bond.
And so they would, Mr. Chairman, I have to have a bond for my construction business, and you can get a bond. You don't pay $25,000 for a bond if you're reputable. I don't know what if you're a foreign manufacturer, I'm not sure how much a bond would cost you. But then basically, Mr. Chairman, we'd go into these stores and we'd say, oh, here's this vape product. Is it one of our licensed Department of Revenue manufacturers, right? And so someone would have to pay $1,000 plus post a bond to put it on Mr. Bailey's shelf. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, that is correct.
And so big and Mr. Chairman, big manufacturers like the one we were talking about earlier, they'd have $1,000, the same as smaller manufacturers that might be located in a foreign country. They all each have to do it, right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, correct.
And then just to be clear, if there's a difference between manufacturers and brands, right? So how would you sort that out? Like, can a brand have 3 different products, but a manufacturer have 3 different brands, but yet cigarette companies do it all the time, right? I'm sure that Altria owns several different cigarette companies cigarette trademarks that we would recognize. Wouldn't that be true of these guys? So would they pay $1,000 for the brand or $1,000 for the light?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, very familiar with how it works for cigarettes because the Department of Revenue certifies fire-safe cigarettes. For cigarettes, it is based upon the brand. So you could have one tobacco manufacturer and they submit a list of 20 different brands each year. We certify those for fire-safe. That's per brand. The way we read this legislation, or the way the Department of Revenue and myself read it, it is just per manufacturer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fanning.
Yes, sir.
Have anybody else that wants to testify? Well, let's work the bill. What's your pleasure? It's been moved by Senator Pappas.
I'll give it a second.
And seconded by Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I need to understand something though, and maybe we could just cut this short. If licensing a product doesn't make it safe, right? I mean, it could be rat poison and they can get a license from the state of Wyoming. Right? I mean, that's what I'm understanding here. If that's the case, I don't see where licensing is any more than like sort of some kind of an official sort of blessing, but it doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean the product's safe or that it comes from someone reputable. I guess it means, according to this bill, they came through customs in the right way and they declared what they had in the box on the customs form. But I think that's all it does. I don't think it really is a health and safety issue. Are you guys following me on this?
My question also is, if they're sending it in as toys now and getting away with it,
Right.
why wouldn't they just keep doing that?
What seems to me, Mr. Chairman, the purpose of the bill is to say, if you're going to be licensed in Wyoming, you pledge and you show that you uphold the product, the legitimacy of the product chain coming in through customs in the right way. And so I think maybe that might be achieved, but I don't see where the public is protected on a safety factor. I'm not seeing that at all.
Any other comments? Senator French.
I know nothing about vaping, not really even sure what it is, so I'm struggling following this bill, so thank you.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the bill as well, too. The comments the good senator next to me made here have been flowing through my mind as well. And, you know, I don't know whether to get it up and try to vet it out a little bit more or just get it over with right here. But to me, it's more cost, it's more regulation. And are we accomplishing anything? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the Department of Revenue, am I wrong about, to get a license, they basically have to show that they complied with importation requirements of customs? It has nothing to do with health and safety. I'm seeing head nodding. So I think that, and Mr. Fanning's come back up if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
More than okay.
Okay, thanks, buddy.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case. The answer to it is yes, it is correct for the most part. There is language in the bill. If you actually take a look at, sorry, Mr. Chairman, on page 3, starting on lines 21, this is where we start talking about, okay, what legitimately requires you or enables you is a better one to get a license through the Wyoming Department of Revenue. So you've got this PACT Act registration form. And this is one where you've actually attested to the federal government that you're complying with some of the regulations to ship tobacco products, actually cigarettes for the most part, moist snuff, vapor products would be included as well, and then other tobacco products, mainly roll your own for PACT Act. And so you've certified there that you have met the cause to qualify to be PACT Act regulated. And so that is a part where there are some additional federal regulations there where you have another governing body taking a look at federal requirements. Then if you don't have a PACT Act, you've got to state why. And again, this is transferring tobacco products across state lines. And then you've got to attest to that you're complying with the border portion of your question. So the answer is yes and no as far as the health concerns and the impact in there. But it may also be a question where the industry can address that question as well, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
I've got the
Fanning,
form right here.
did you say they follow some of the rules?
Mr. Chairman, I did. PACT Act is a really a good regulatory tool, but like anything, it's not completely perfect.
Okay, thank you.
I've actually got one of these forms. Maybe we could form a little company and ship some cigarettes or some vapes, but
You mean roll our own?
it has section 1 is business information. Places of businesses is section 2. Agent authorized to accept service is section 3. That's sort of like our LLC registration. And then section 4. Well, that's it. It's just kind of a registration. You fill out the form. It doesn't, you don't declare your product safe. You don't say there's no bad stuff in it. You just provide like an address and a telephone number and the name of your agent. And if you,
You two come back up, please.
Sure.
Thank you. I just have another quick question. Is there a list of ingredients that it's inspected for, or what's good or what's not good?
Mr. Chairman, not with this piece of legislation, which you all have pointed out. Manufacturers, when they submit their applications to the FDA, have to provide that type of information to them in great detail. What you find, or what I should say, is what we have found in other states is that when you put this type of regulation in, it's what I would consider legitimate manufacturers who are making quality products and are following the rules for importation, who go and get the license. And those who are not following the rules and maybe making less than quality products choose not to. So it's in part solves the problem of having these illicit products being, sold in the state. Very importantly, it also allows the retailers to very easily go on the state website to see which manufacturers are complying with the state law, and allows them to then feel more confident that they are offering for sale products from manufacturers who are following the law.
And one last quick question. Is it possible to get licensed under this bill without going through the FDA process? Thank you.
There are, Mr. Chairman, there are, as part of the Customs and Border Patrol requirements, there is a process through which you have to attest that you have submitted an application or have an authorization from the FDA.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Are we ready for roll call? Donna, will you call the roll? There's an,
Can I forward the amendment?
you can.
I'd like to offer I'd like to offer the amendment, page 11, line 12, after 2, insert annual and strike the remainder of the line. Page 11, line 13, strike not less than 2 and strike annual after checks. Basically making it an annual.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment has passed.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case.
I would change the $1,000 registration fee to $250 and the bond to $5,000.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That amendment has passed.
Mr. Chairman, can I just clarify the amendments? The first amendment was on page 11, line 12, strike not less than, and then on line 13, strike 2, and then, thank you.
I'm not seeing it on page 11, so
Okay, I have it now. I have the printed copy. Thank you.
okay.
And then the second amendment is on page 5, line 9, replace 1,000 with $250. And on line 16, replace 25,000 with $5,000. That'd actually be line 15 and 16.
Yep.
Yes.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. And the reason I would support this amendment, sir, is that, you know, to apply, they've already complied with the PACT Act and they're complying with customs. It's just like if you want to have a presence in Wyoming, you either pay the entry fee of $1,000 and a $25,000 bond. I mean, you're just as legal and they're, as far as we know, just as safe or not safe with 250 versus 5,000. And they, really, they've testified this is not a huge enforcement issue, so I don't see why we would overcharge. All that does is keep the little guys out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We passed that, didn't we? Yeah. Okay, on to the bill. Donna, you want to call the roll?
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 194, e-cigarette and vapor material manufacturer licenses as amended. Senator Case?
No.
Senator French?
No.
Senator Ide?
No.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman McEwen?
No.
We have 1 aye and 4 no, Mr. Chairman.
Senate File 194 has failed to pass Senate Revenue Committee. Next bill we will look at is Senate File 93.
Maybe we get Mr. Fanning up. He helped the Tribal Relations Committee with this bill, and this has to do with purchases made and delivered to tribal trust lands on the Wind River Reservation that are held by only one tribe. The current legislation, I think it talks about land held by both tribes. Is that right? This just kind of makes it because some of the land is held by just one tribe. And Mr. Fanning, I hope I got that right, but I think I did. I don't remember it's a really simple bill. The tribes often in our law are collectively referred to, but they are two tribes, and they actually, they own some land together and they own land separately, and it's for the benefit of the tribe, so it's trust land. And this clears that up, and I hope I've done that right, Mr. Fanning, and you can bail me out if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Brett Fanning, Department of Revenue. This bill is the product of a couple different years of interim work. And what Senate File 93 does is actually codify what is currently happening in practice right now. And as Senator Case had mentioned, here's the backstory with this bill in simplest of terms. Right now, there are establishments on the Wind River Indian Reservation that, if they were located in another part of our state, would be collecting sales tax and lodging tax primarily. It's been a longstanding practice of the Department of Revenue, even though it is in our rules that they should be collecting, or that those establishments should be collecting sales and lodging tax on sales to non-tribal members. There's some United States Supreme Court decisions, and there's also language in our Wyoming Department of Revenue rules that they should be collecting sales and use tax. My boss and my boss's predecessor and their predecessors before them have made the determination not to go on to the Wind River Indian Reservation and attempt to license those vendors or collect sales or lodging tax from them. In the testimony that we've heard over a couple different years, this language on page 2 generally relates to the casinos and restaurants and items. And the way I have interpreted it over the past few years is that those lands given for those facilities are given to only one of those tribes. So like, for example, you've got a couple different casinos on the Wind River Indian Reservation. That land is duly for that particular tribe. And then other casinos, other restaurants, just for those tribal entities as well. So this just codifies what is currently happening in practice right now. It just gives an exemption that clarifies that if you are operating one of those establishments on a particular section of land, that you do not have to collect sales, use tax if applicable, and then lodging tax. So, and with that, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I hopefully that rejogs your memory and stand for any questions.
He's very kind and he's very gentle, because I was all mixed up with the two tribe trust land. So, and there's no activity on any jointly owned trust land, but presumably if they had a joint venture on jointly owned trust land, that would come under, it'd have the same effect, wouldn't it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, if I may, yes, that is how I understand it as well.
I just have one quick question. Do you have the ability to go on to the reservation and perform an audit as it stands right now?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to punt that answer. Historically, it has been the practice here at the Department of Revenue and when I was with the Department of Audit, that we would not go on to the reservation. I'm going to leave it at that if I could, Mr. Chairman.
I just asked you to describe section 7 of the Constitution. It was kind of an unfair question, but I thought maybe you'd have an answer or what our current practice is.
Yes. Our current practice is not to go onto the reservation in the overwhelming majority of cases.
Does this particular piece of legislation, if we pass it, provide protections against the state being sued?
Mr. Chairman, the simple answer is yes, it does.
We'll have constitutional review class later. Thank you. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fanning. I just want to, I still don't quite understand, are we favoring one tribe over another with this legislation? And, you know, I'm glad the good chairman brought that up on whether or not we can go on and audit them. It seems like a lot of times that these Wind River, Indian Reservation, whatever tribes are on there, act against state interests a lot of times. So I'm concerned about this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, no, it does not favor one tribe or another. As we've heard testimony over the last couple of years, there is land set aside for one tribe, and then there's land set aside for another tribe. And those are two separate tribes on our single reservation here in Wyoming. Does not favor a single tribe.
One last question. I go to one of the gift shops. How do I prove I'm not an Indian or I am an Indian?
Mr. Chairman, that is completely the reason behind this bill, is to codify that. I visited gift shops on the reservation. In fact, I believe I even submitted a use tax on a meal that I had last year, because that is the exact question here is, and you would hear that in testimony on the next bill coming up. It is very difficult, and this just puts in statute what is currently happening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion?
Is there anybody online from the tribes? Move the bill. Oh, we're almost out of time.
Oh, we're good till 2:30.
Oh, 2:30?
I thought it said 2:15.
No, 2:30.
Was it 2:30?
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Travis McNevin here on behalf of the Northern Arapahoe Business Council. As was previously mentioned, this bill has been worked for the last couple of interims to try to find the solution for the circumstance which you just alluded to, Mr. Chairman. And so in the brevity of time, the council supports this bill moving forward.
Anybody else want to testify? Well, the bill's been moved by Senator Case. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Pappas. I think it's pretty simple. Are we ready for roll call? Donna, will you call the roll?
Roll call vote on Senate File 93, Tribal Trust Land Sales and Use Tax Exemption. Senator Case?
Aye.
Senator French?
Aye.
Senator Ide?
Oh, get an eye to get it up there.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman McEwen?
Aye.
We have 5 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Senate File 93 is passed revenue. Now we'll move on to Senate File 94.
Mr. Chairman, speaking from the Tribal Relations Committee, this is sort of a similar bill, but there is an issue on the reservation with regard to remote sales and how if a person in a remote sales would like, eBay or most likely Amazon, we can use proper names in committee and it helps to clear things up. if you live in a rural area and you have an Amazon sale and they deliver to your house in a UPS truck, right now the state collects sales tax on that because Amazon doesn't know it's on the reservation. So they pay the sales tax, and it would be, the Fremont County sales tax may be part of the Hot Springs County sales tax. What this bill does, and Mr. Fanning is going to make sure I get it right, and which is that if the state would take that money and give it to the tribes, and as provided in this subsection, and that's all there is to it. I don't actually remember the distribution. I don't know, they don't agree on the distribution, so I think that's a little bit of a sticky wicket. But that's what would happen if they reach an agreement about the distribution. State would send it to the tribes according to the agreement determined, and the state would keep 1% for administration. And that's kind of the plan to go forward. It's probably the easiest plan. I do point out that some recipients, some purchasers on the reservation are not native people, and they live on deeded land. And so some purchase would go to non-native people on deeded land, but within the boundaries of the Wind River Indian Reservation. So their sales tax, even though they might consider themselves to be county residents, et cetera, would go to the same distribution. So I point that out. Mr. Fanning, how did I do
Mr.
that?
Fanning,
Make sure I didn't mess it up too bad. We appreciate him. We really appreciate, I know we appreciate him in this committee, but in the tribal committee, he's been fabulous as well.
my question is, as we talk about the different rules for taxation, is it possible to determine a residence being delivered that's a non-Indian versus an Indian? And how do we track who pays that tax and who doesn't?
That's what we've been
Thank you.
trying to do.
Mr. Chairman, all valid questions and all ones that we've had discussions over the past several years. It's hard, it's a challenge is the direct answer to your question. So just want to set the stage ever so briefly on this. So when somebody purchases something from a large online retailer and has it shipped to the reservation and they are a tribal member, there is an exemption available in our statutes. We administer that. They can be exempt if they provide the online retailer with an exemption certificate. That doesn't always happen for a variety of reasons. So if you purchase something from online, maybe the exemption certificate portal online is tricky. Maybe you didn't have your documentation for whatever reason. You did not provide, or the customer did not provide the exemption certificate. So the online retailer charges you tax. That creates a conundrum because there's an exemption that's applicable. And so many discussions with the Tribal Relations Committee on how to deal with that. One of them was to exempt everything on the reservation. And there's challenges with that as well. As Senator Case knows. This was the solution to multiple years on trying to strike a balance between folks who give exemption certificates to online retailers and then folks who don't for whatever valid reason. So then if there was an online retailer, multiples of them, charge tax, the thought was the Department of Revenue would put this into its own separate bucket. And Mr. Chairman, and Senator Case, that own separate bucket is all of the 5.5% for Fremont County. It was all of it. The state's portion, the county's portion, as currently written, put it all into this bucket. Then the second step of this process is the state of Wyoming has to come to an agreement with the two tribes, basically in an MOU. And that MOU, we've got this bucket of taxpayer dollars over here. How does that get distributed to the two tribes? And that's where a lot of the conversation has been as well. So it takes two portions of this. we've got to get the sales tax into this bucket. Right now, Mr. Chairman, we don't have the bucket. And the Department of Revenue would ask for IT programming dollars to make that bucket happen. If a large online retailer sends something onto the reservation, right now, that's just going to Fremont County or Hot Springs County, which is also a possibility. We would need to have IT programming on our form to say, hey, it's not just going to Fremont or Hot Springs, it's going to the Wind River Indian Reservation. So it sounds like you have a question. I'll stop right there, Mr. Chairman.
So we're back to this legislation kind of protects the state from a lawsuit. Or kind of, we are a sovereign nation and then we're not. And that's my joke about the Constitution. The MOU would need to be between the two Indian tribes. If we set up the bucket, as I understand, the two tribes are at an argument over who gets how much. One tribe says we have 70% of the population, we should get 70% of the sales and use tax. The other tribe is saying we own half the land, so we should get half of the sales and use tax. And so with this legislation, we're trying to put it in a bucket until they settle that, and then we send it to them. Is that my understanding?
Mr. Chairman, in the simplest terms, I believe that's accurate. Yes. There is a discussion about if collecting sales tax from tribal members on a reservation, if there is a question if that could cause litigation in the future or not. And so this was an attempt to prevent that. So in the most simplest of terms, you are correct, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we've just covered all my knowledge on this, so on the simplest terms.
Yep. And Mr. Chairman, this is only online and remote sales tax. There are also other sales tax questions that we hear quite a bit. You will have retailers that are actually brick and mortar physically in Wyoming that are charging sales tax to tribal members. And I've made this comment numerous times that if you are having trouble as a tribal member who has a valid exemption in Wyoming, trouble getting your taxpayer dollars back, I have assisted multiple people on going through those proper channels to get their taxpayer dollars back. This particular legislation is only for the online sales component. And I know there was confusion with that as well.
You have a question, Senator Ryan?
Yeah, thank you,
Senator Ryan.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this looks messy to me. I don't know how we clean it up. I mean, when you have, a so-called sovereign nation, and then you're integrated with sales tax with the state, I'm not smart enough to figure out how, with MOUs and a bucket over here, and if that MOU is not in place and they can't decide, I'm kind of at a loss on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think what the bill's trying to do is rather than us send the tax dollars to Fremont County, we keep it in an account. And when they decide how it's going to be distributed, we give it back to the reservation. But what we're doing now,
But that's just on online stuff and remote.
yes,
It
what we're
is.
doing now is overtaxing them. And I believe.
It's a complicated question in a bigger sense too, because Native people are citizens of Wyoming. Part of the sales tax comes to Cheyenne to support services of the state, which also benefit Native people. Part is local governments in Fremont County. But the issue is, there is no question that a tribal member can use in their exemption certificate and can assert it, and the Department of Revenue will back them up. The law will back them up. It's kind of cumbersome, but it helps for sales purchases made off the reservation, and it would work for online sales. But it's a difficult thing, and tribal members have difficulty getting it. And in part, on the online world, it's a little more cumbersome for them, I believe. And we had lots of testimony that that wasn't working, that they were denied that. And so this is kind of what we came up with. The big issue is the division of the money between the tribes. They expressed support for this. Not all of them did, but they did express support for this. But they're very wary about how the money is divided up. And right now, there is this thing called the per capita. It's the sharing of the mineral revenues on the reservation. And it results in payments to both tribes. The Arapaho tribe and the Shoshone tribe have equal stake in that. They're considered equal owners of the reservation at the tribal level. Now, there's a lot of animosity about that, and there's a lot of history about Arapahoes came later, all this. But right now, those are equal. But the Arapaho tribe is much larger in terms of membership, so that they're more than twice the size of the Shoshone tribe in terms of membership. And part of this is because the Shoshone tribe has a more restrictive enrollment criteria, but it means their per capita payments are higher for tribal members, is what it really, and more than twice the size of the Arapaho ones. And so that's a bit of a rub as to whether this should be distributed. Some people would argue based on population. Some people would argue based on the per capitas with the enrollment. In essence, half goes to each tribe. And I don't know if they're going to be able to settle that. But with the pot growing each year, I think it would encourage them. I think all this taxes on the reservation is kind of a hard thing. And I'd like to go to a system where they bill and keep their own taxes. And it's an internal thing. And so they charge taxes and collect them for administering government on the reservation. If I'm a non-native person that goes to the casino, I pay their tax. A native person that buys something in Riverton would pay the other tax, and that's the way it would work out. But they'd still have to settle between them the distribution of the tax. And I'm not sure, and I know this, I'm trying not to make this sound petty, because this is the only reservation in the United States that has this problem. This is an act of Congress that forced two tribes to share the same reservation and have these difficulties that no other tribe faces. People talk about Navajo and Hopi, for example. The Hopi reservation has a clear boundary, clear jurisdiction. It's within the Navajo reservation, but it's separate government. This only is a Wyoming, Northern Arapaho, and Eastern Shoshone problem, and it's really difficult. That's part of the reason my representation is difficult. I think Mr. McNiven would probably correct me, and maybe he can add some more flavor to this. But this does say we shouldn't be collecting taxes. They shouldn't be going to Fremont County. We're going to put them in an account for the benefit of the tribes when we get an agreement.
Not that it matters, but if we're going through history, I think one of the tribes was supposed to be a guest or a temporary member for a little while.
Well, it's very true. The Shoshone tribe was always pretty kind and worked with white people. Chief Washki especially saw the advantages of partnering with the white government to achieve. He's got to select the reservation. The Shoshone participated in U.S. military expeditions against the Arapaho on occasion, and the Arapaho, as a legacy of they had a split in their history about treaty tribes and non-treaty tribes. There was a very horrible massacre in Colorado called the Sand Creek Massacre. The people in the Wind River Reservation, the Northern Arapaho people, are descendants of those people that were at the Sand Creek Massacre. They were pursued and chased, and that was during the Civil War. And for the next decade, they were pursued and chased, and they were finally brought to the Wind River Reservation. Some say that it was temporary. Others not, and Mr. McNiven probably can do a better job of that than me, but it's very, very poignant, and really it goes back to the same Chief Washki and Chief black hole of the Arapahoes that were people beyond our stature who realized that they needed to make peace and move forward. And that's how we got here. And there was compensation paid. But there are Shoshone people to this day that argue that they're the only treaty tribe and that they didn't agree to that and the compensation was inadequate. I'm sorry, Mr. McNiven,
Thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Mr. Chairman, Travis McNevin on behalf of Northern Arapahoe Business Council, of course, was not prepared necessarily to get into a great deal of tribal history, but to support this bill, that the multiple years and complex nature as has been discussed here today through the last couple of interims on the Tribal Relations Committee as it relates to just jurisdictional issues. In this case, tax jurisdictional issues on the reservation lands and the different just challenges as it relates to online purchases, as Mr. Fanning has correctly illustrated and given. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I feel like the information that both he and Senator Case have shared is accurate and support the efforts that have been done to get the bill to this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We will close public comment. What's your pleasure?
move the bill.
Moved by Senator Case. Seconded by Senator Pappas. Does anybody have any questions on page 1? Page 2.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Wright.
Just, yeah, real quick. So line 11, or starts on the end of line 10. The department shall deduct 1% to cover all administrative expenses and costs for deposit by the state treasurer into the general fund for that amount. So we're getting a little fee here, I assume, off of having to handle the tribe's funding on their taxes. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Page 3.
Mr. Chairman, I think that page 3 ties in the bill that we just had. Is that fair, Mr. Fanning? It's a little section E.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, these are completely standalone bills.
Yeah,
That,
but 3915-111R. What is that?
so that's our sorry, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case. So 3915-111 is our distribution statute for the statewide 4%. And then 3915-211 is our distribution statute for our local shares, our voter approved pennies.
So what does E mean?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, this means that notwithstanding our normal distribution statutes, so subsection A in 3915-211, let me navigate there real quick, my apologies. 3915-211A, that is the distribution statute for all of our voter approved pennies. General purpose tax, specific purpose tax, economic development tax. And then A through D is just how those are distributed. for each of those voter approved pennies. So what E is saying is, okay, outside of all of the voter approved pennies for this tax that's going into the separate bucket, it's going into that separate bucket. Everything else stays the same. Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, it sounds like there's still a little bit of question, maybe on lines 3 through 6. So this is the part where we, as the Department of Revenue, are setting up this additional bucket. It's gonna come over here. This bucket is gonna be distributed differently than all the other taxes that could be associated with voter-approved pennies.
And that, Mr. Chairman, that bucket, that's 100% goes into that bucket.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, it's the 99%.
Not yet, less than 1% administration, but there's no distribution for the, so if there is a optional 1% sales tax, for example, that would not, that the county passes, tribal members vote with the county, but they would get a distribution of that as well, if it was a remote sale.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, so the distribution, so the voter-approved penny for Fremont County or Hot Springs County, if it's an online sale, that's going into the bucket. If it's
Exactly.
not an online sale, it's going elsewhere, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Fanning. Sorry to be so torturous, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Are we ready for the question?
Roll call vote on Senate File 94, Wind River Reservation Remote Sales and Use Tax. Senator Case?
Aye.
Senator French?
No.
Senator Ide?
No.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman McEwen?
Aye.
We have 3 aye and 2 no, Mr.
You
Chairman.
guys make it tough on your chairman lately.
What's that?
I say they make it tough on you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that concludes the revenue meeting.
I like your last system where you said we need to. Just let them keep it. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I want.